Welcome to the Explorer. Okay, today we're tackling a huge story. 2,500 years of philosophy. But look, this isn't going to be some dry history lesson with a bunch of memes and baits. No, we're on the hunt for something much bigger. We're chasing one single question. The one that really gets at the heart of what it means to be human. And that question is our launch pad. For most of our history, the answers we came up with were myths. The kind, epic stories about gods fighting it out in the sky, or the entire world hatching from some giant egg. And these stories, they were great. They gave us meaning for sure. But they weren't the end of the story. Because then, something changed. A few people started asking a different kind of question. They stopped looking for a who and started looking for a what. They were hunting for patterns, for causes, for real physical explanations. So let's jump in. Let's follow this incredible journey and see how the questions we ask have completely transformed over time. All right, so here's our first big turn, the first major shift. It happens when the questions themselves fundamentally change. We literally stop asking, okay, who made the world, and start asking, wait a minute, what is the world made of? And that right there, that's the jump from myth to method. And this captures that shift perfectly, doesn't it? You had thinkers like Thales of Miletus, who looked at the world around him and he saw a puzzle to be solved. His big idea? That everything, absolutely everything, was made of water. Now, I know that sounds kind of simple to us today, but you have to understand how revolutionary that was. It was a genuine attempt to find one single natural substance that could explain it all. No gods needed. And you know what happens when you start asking new questions, right? You get new debates. And this one was a big one, philosophy's first great debate. So you've got Heraclitus on one side saying, hey, the only constant is change. Everything is in flux. And then on the other side, you've got Parmenides, who's like, nope, not buying it. Change is just an illusion. True reality is one single, unchanging, permanent thing. And this clash, this is a tension philosophy is still wrestling with today. Okay, so after looking out at the universe, the next huge shift turns that philosophical lens around. We go from the cosmos to us. The focus becomes the human mind, our values, and maybe the biggest question of all. How should we live? And this, of course, brings us to Socrates in ancient Athens. This guy, he never wrote a single thing down. Instead, he just walked around the city asking people these relentless, probing questions. His whole deal was that true wisdom starts when you finally admit that you know nothing. For him, philosophy wasn't some boring subject you study in a classroom. It was a life you had to live, a daily workout of questioning your own beliefs. And what's so wild is that this inward turn wasn't just happening in Greece. It was a global thing. At roughly the same time, you have the Buddha in India digging deep into the root cause of human suffering to find a way out. And over in China, Confucius was trying to solve social chaos by focusing on ritual and social harmony. Think about that. 3 different thinkers, 3 different corners of the world, all laser focused on the same basic problem. How do we live a good life? So this focus on the self, it plants a seed that grows into one of the most powerful, world-changing ideas in history. The idea that the foundation of all knowledge isn't some ancient book or some king or priest. No, it's the power of your own individual mind. And this, right here, is basically the dawn of the modern age. And it's captured perfectly by René Descartes. Imagine this. He decides to doubt everything. Everything he thought he knew. What he thought, what he was told, all of it. He throws it all out until he hits rock bottom. One single thing he can't possibly doubt. And what was it? The fact that he was doubting. The very act of thinking proved that a thinker must exist. And just like that, his own mind, his own consciousness becomes the brand new starting point for everything. This newfound confidence in our own reason just lit a fire under a whole new way of doing things. You had people like Francis Bacon who basically said, look, if you want real knowledge, stop just reading old books. Get out there, observe the world, run experiments, gather facts. What you're seeing here is the scientific method being born, a real, disciplined process for getting from what to why. And believe me, this new way of thinking didn't stay locked up in philosophy books. Oh no, it had absolutely explosive political consequences. A guy named John Locke comes along and argues that because we're rational beings, we're all born with natural rights. And here's the crucial part. Governments don't give us these rights. They exist to protect the rights we already have. That one idea, it became the fuel for revolutions all over the world. So for a few hundred years, it really seemed like we had it figured out. Reason, science, progress. It felt like we were on a steady path forward. But what happens when the very ground beneath your feet starts to crumble? What happens when all those certainties begin to crack? Well, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche diagnosed this exact moment with just 3 unforgettable words, and with them he announced this huge, profound turning point for Western civilization, a moment that was equal parts terrifying crisis and radical new freedom. Now, it's really important to get this right. Nietzsche wasn't high-fiving about this, he wasn't celebrating. He was a doctor diagnosing a condition. He was observing that the shared moral compass, the religious framework that had guided society for centuries, was just losing its magnetic pole. And with those old values fading away, humanity was suddenly faced with this awesome and frankly terrifying new job. We had to create our own meaning from scratch. And in the wake of that crumbling certainty, all these new ideas rushed in to try and fill that void. You had Karl Marx, who looked for answers in economics and class conflict. Sigmund Freud looked inward to the hidden depths of our own minds, arguing that we're driven by unconscious desires we don't even understand. And then you had the existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, who just leaned right into the chaos. They said, yep, the universe is absurd, there's no built-in purpose. And because of that, we are, get this, condemned to be free. We have to create our own meaning. And all of that, it brings us right to our own doorstep, right here, today. Because the search for answers, it never stopped. It's just that now the questions have gotten all tangled up with the incredible technologies we've built. I mean, think about it. For centuries, we put the human mind on a pedestal at the very center of everything. And now? Now we've built machines that can actually learn and reason. So it forces us to ask this really uncomfortable question. Is our consciousness, is it just a super complex biological algorithm? Is there anything that really separates our minds from the AI we're creating? Or how about this? Every click, every search, every post, our digital lives create this permanent, searchable record of our thoughts and actions. And that raises these really urgent modern versions of old questions about freedom versus security. When your inner life becomes a data point for sale, how does that change who you even are? And then there's the big one, the one that I think would have absolutely blown Descartes' mind, the simulation hypothesis. As our video games and virtual worlds get so realistic they're almost indistinguishable from reality, we have to seriously ask, could our own reality be one of them? Are we living in base reality, or are we all just code running on some unbelievably advanced computer somewhere? And that really brings us to the core takeaway from this whole 2,500-year journey. The point of philosophy, it was never about finding the final correct answer. It's always been about asking a better question. It's about constantly refining and improving the way we ask why. You know, every single great thinker we've talked about today started with a question that just burned inside them, one they couldn't let go of. And as we wrap up this explicar, that story, that search, it continues. So the real question is, what's yours?